From Lagertha's stunning funeral, which made every Vikings fan cry their eyes out, to Ivar's crazy speech that single-handedly scared off an entire Saxon army, these are the most watched scenes in the hit show Vikings. One of the most watched scenes in Vikings concerns an absolute madman and a grizzly bear. Bjorn left Kattegat to go on a jolly little adventure to prove to his dad that he was able to survive the tough winter and be as strong as him. During his little self-development journey, Bjorn managed to stumble across a bear. A grizzly bear. Well, in true Vikings fashion, Bjorn took the bear on. And the scene was wild. Sure, it wasn't the best fight scene the show has ever gifted us. But there are few other shows you can watch and see a guy with a man bun and an axe take on an 8-foot bear, making this scene one of the most memorable in the entire show. Now, Vikings is known for its awesome war cries. And by far the most watched war cry scene was when the Norsemen faced Paris in complete darkness, chanting, Skeggold, Skamold, Skilder, Skilder, Roklufner, which translates to, Axe time, sword time, the shields are splintered. And then the rest of the Vikings started to chant, giving every viewer complete goosebumps. I mean, this scene was absolutely insane and got everyone pumped for what was to come. On the subject of Paris, another crazy scene in Vikings was when Ragnar faked his death during the Battle of Paris. Ragnar faked his own death to get inside the city's walls. I mean, he was being transported to the city inside a coffin, kind of like a Trojan horse. Then, during the funeral, this madman arose from the coffin like a zombie and opened the city's gates. The icing on the cake was that this scene proved that the seer's prophecy came true when he said, I can see that not the living but the dead will conquer Paris.
I can see that not the living but the dead will conquer Paris.
Another one of the most watched scenes in the show involves the madman Ivar. Now, this guy has had his fair share of memorable moments. But his most famous scene was when he screamed at the Saxons in the Homeland episode saying, Don't you know who I am? You can't kill me. Ivar's scary words managed to terrorize his enemies so much that they refrained from attacking him. I mean, to be fair, who wants to go after a guy covered in your ally's blood, who's also screaming about how strong he is? Not me, that's for sure. Moving on to a more emotional rather than brutal memorable scene, we have the time when Ragnar gave Athelstan a final goodbye. In case you forgot, these guys were best friends, and when Athelstan died, Ragnar was heartbroken. He bid farewell to his friend, saying, You are a brave man, Athelstan. I always respected you for that. You taught me so much. You saw yourself as weak and conflicted, but to me, you were fearless because you dared to question. This scene brought a tear to the eye of every Vikings fan, and many have rewatched that episode over and over just for those few lines. Another incredible emotional moment was Lagertha's funeral. Now, this girl was one of the main characters in the show, so when she died, a hole was left in everyone's hearts, from us to Ragnar. As such, her funeral was utterly heart-wrenching. The scene was beautifully executed, with Lagertha lying in a flaming boat and being sent off to sea, in true Viking fashion. The beauty of the scene alone has made it one of the most watched in the entire series. Now, let's travel back, way back, all the way to Season 1, Episode 1. After engaging in a battle which Ragnar killed off his enemies with ease, he saw a vision of Odin himself. This scene showed Ragnar's close connection with the gods, exemplifying him to be a special individual in the Viking world. This episode is what kicked everything off in the show, which is why it's been watched over and over. Another epic scene that's rewatched all the time happened in the very next episode. Ragnar created a plan to take his army to new territory in England. This led to an incredibly cinematic scene in which we saw the bloodthirsty Vikings strolling across the beach in badass fashion. And then, out of nowhere, a group of monks decided to take on Ragnar and the gang. Well, it's safe to say, the monks stood no chance. This scene showed the power of the Vikings and displayed the religious themes of the show in a great way. Now, let's move on to some of the most watched battle scenes in the show. Kicking things off with one of the earliest wars, the Battle of Wessex, which took place in episode 9 of season 2. Ragnar planned to take on the King of Denmark to take his wealth of treasure and resources. However, while en route to the battle, the Vikings strayed off course and ended up in Wessex. There, a cunning king awaited their arrival. Ragnar and the King of Wessex tried to negotiate things out peacefully. But naturally, these negotiations completely failed. So what happened? The two armies engaged in battle. Several battles to be exact. Unfortunately for our protagonist, the Vikings were defeated. Not only was this battle amazingly choreographed, but it also showed that the Vikings were not invincible and could, in fact, be taken down by an opponent with great tactics. Another epic battle, which is rewatched by fans all the time, happened during episode 13 of season 5. Ragnar had just died and his sons were out for one thing: revenge. They created a strong band of warriors with troops from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, all united under one flag. This army was called the Great Heathen Army, and they had one goal: take over England. And they did exactly that. Under the tactical leadership of Ivar, the army absolutely decimated the English forces. It took some time, but eventually the English were all but dead. To end this epic war, the Vikings gave Allel a blood eagle, which was a ritualistic form of death for the crew. Another epic battle that had fans coming back for more was the Battle for Kattegat. This is arguably the best fight scene in the entire series, which is exactly why so many people watch it over and over. This battle was actually Vikings versus Vikings, which, as you can probably imagine, led to a bloodbath. For some reason, Borgi decided to take on Ragnar's crew after the two leaders had a dispute. Well, it's safe to say that this did not end well for Borgi. He was completely destroyed by Ragnar and even died by Blood Eagle as a result. I mean, come on, man. Everyone knows that you don't take on Ragnar. Another awesome Viking civil war occurred after the death of Sigurd. This dispute involved Ivar and Bjorn. During the first encounter, Ivar and his allies were defeated in stunning fashion. But then, Ivar joined forces with Rollo and wiped out Bjorn's army in their final encounter. Not only was this scene essential for the development of the story, but it was also one of the best battle scenes we've ever seen in the show, making for a great rewatcher. So, from the awesome battle scenes in the show, like the Battle of Wessex and the Battle of Kattegat, to the scenes of pure emotion like Athelstan's death, which made every fan of the show burst into tears. Those were the most watched scenes in Vikings.